On this edition of Early Look, I'm going to be previewing the UFC middleweight title fight taking place August 17th at UFC 305 in Perth, Western Australia. My name is James Lynch. If you've never watched the show before, I'm going to go through a bunch of different stats, a bunch of different intangibles, and then I'm going to give you my prediction at the end of this video. Some of this stuff may have relevance to you, it may not. I would love to hear your prediction in the comments once you're done watching the video and heard all the points I've had to make. And like we always do, we're going to do a quick tale of the tape between these two. Dricus Du Plessis, the middleweight champion, Israel Adesanya, the challenger and the former middleweight champion. So you can see there, Du Plessis 21-2, Adesanya 24-3. 30 years old to 35, so Du Plessis going to be younger. 6'1" to 6'4", 76-inch reach to 80. So Adesanya going to be a little bit bigger in this spot. If you remember, Du Plessis has fought as low as 170, and Adesanya has fought as high as 205. So interesting matchup there from that perspective. Let's start first with the current middleweight champion, still knocks, Dricus Du Plessis. And you can see there's 30 years old, 6'1", with a 76-inch reach. He's got 9 knockouts, 10 submissions, and 2 decisions in his career. I mentioned it there. He's 30 years old, 6'1", with a 76-inch reach. So he'll be 5 years younger than Adesanya when he steps in the cage. He's a second-degree black belt in kickboxing, which is interesting. Obviously, Adesanya, a kickboxer as well. He's the former EFC middleweight and welterweight champion. He's the current UFC middleweight champion. He's the first South African to win a UFC championship. He's got Performance of the Night 2 times against Trevin Giles and Robert Whittaker. He's got Fight of the Night 2 times against Darren Till and Sean Strickland. He had landed the most significant strikes per minute in UFC middleweight division history at 6.49 when he fought Sean Strickland. Most significant strikes landed per minute in UFC middleweight division history. So he's landed the most strikes despite not having a lot of fights. He's also got the 6th longest win streak in UFC middleweight division history at 7. Du Plessis did not have an amateur debut. He went straight to the pros in July of 2013, made his UFC debut in October of 2020 when he fought Marcus Perez. He is 6-0 in the UFC. He's got 4 stoppage victories. Some notable wins include Brad Tavares, Darren Till, Derek Brunson, Robert Whittaker, and Sean Strickland. He doesn't have any losses in the UFC. He's only the second fighter to finish Robert Whittaker at 185 pounds. The first is Israel Adesanya. He's had a couple of layoffs in his career. Some of these were visa-related. Some of these were injury-related. Going from Marcus Perez to Trevin Giles, there was a 273-day layoff. Going from Giles to Tavares, there was a 357-day layoff. Going from Whittaker to Sean Strickland, there was a 196-day layoff. And going from Strickland to Adesanya, there'll be a 210-day layoff. So he's had longer layoffs before. But obviously, I'm sure would like to be a little bit more active than he usually is. Of course, he was supposed to fight Israel Adesanya back at, which card was that? Whatever Adesanya fought Strickland on. It was, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but it was UFC 293. But, the story goes is that Du Plessis fought injured against Whittaker, didn't want to rush into a title fight after that, after being injured. He was heavily criticized from Adesanya's team about that. Ended up waiting it out, and we know what happened there. Strickland gets the big upset, and then these two meet Strickland and Du Plessis in January at UFC 297. Du Plessis, I mentioned that there's fought in different weight classes. He's fought 17 times at middleweight, 4 times at welterweight, and he's fought a catchweight 1 time at 176. The only close fight that Du Plessis has had in his career was his last one against Sean Strickland. And if you go look at MMADecisions.com, that's the site where you can find the media scorecards and how they score each fight. If you go back and look at that one, that was UFC 297 back in January. 13 media members scored the fight for DDP, 10 scoring it for Strickland. So it was close. Some people do feeling like the title should have remained with Sean Strickland. Let's look at his stats. Du Plessis, that is. Go look on UFCstats.com. We'll find that there. And you'll see that Du Plessis, 6.49 strikes landed per minute, so that's a lot. His striking accuracy is at 50%. His striking defense is at 55%, so he does block a bit. His takedown average is 3, which is pretty high, actually. Takedown accuracy is at 51%. His takedown defense is at 40%, and his sub-average is at 0.8. So that's everything you need to know about Still Knocks Dricus Du Plessis. Can he go out there and defend his title successfully as he takes on Israel Adesanya? Let's talk about the former middleweight champion, the last style bender, Israel Adesanya. And as you can see here, Adesanya 24-3. He's 35 years old. He's 6'4" with an 80-inch reach. So Adesanya going to have a 3-inch height and 4-inch reach advantage in this fight. He's a BJJ purple belt. Trains at City Kickboxing. He's a former Glory middleweight championship title challenger. He's also the 2-time UFC middleweight champion. He's had 5 successful title defenses in his first reign as middleweight champion. Didn't have a single title defense in his second reign because he lost to Sean Strickland. And he's the first 2-time UFC middleweight champion, which I actually found kind of interesting. So nobody has lost lost the middleweight title and then won it back before. So Adesanya's the first one to do that. Adesanya's got performance of the night 6 times against Rob Wilkinson, Brad Tavares, Derek Brunson, Robert Whittaker, Paulo Costa, and Alex Pereira 2 times. He's the only fighter to knock out Alex Pereira in the UFC. That's a pretty significant thing. And he's got fight of the night 2 times against Anderson Silva and Calvin Gastelum. Adesanya went, his debut was way back, his amateur debut in MMA was way back in November of 2009. He made his MMA debut in March of 2012 and then made his UFC debut in February of 2018, obviously coming over from the world of kickboxing, where he had a very impressive record over there. He's 13-3 in the UFC. He's got 5 stoppage wins, some notable wins for Adesanya. He's got a whole bunch. 2 wins over Marvin Vettori. Vettori's ranked. I know people don't think Vettori's very good, but he's still a ranked opponent. That is a good win on the books. Derek Brunson, Anderson Silva, Calvin Gastelum. 2 wins over Robert Whittaker, Yoel Romero, Jared Cannonier, and most recently Alex Pereira. One of the few guys to have a win over Alex Pereira. And he's got some losses as well. We got to talk about Jan Blachowicz. Lost a fight against him at 205. Was knocked out by Pereira in their first fight in MMA. And then he obviously lost to Sean Strickland, one of the biggest upsets in UFC history. Adesanya has been one of the more active fighters on the roster. You look at it here since 2018, fighting multiple times every year. But this is going to be the longest layoff of his UFC career. Remember, he talked about taking some time off, being burnt out. After the Strickland fight, he took some time off, and it's going to be a 343-day layoff by the time he steps into the cage against Du Plessis, so take that for what it's worth. Adesanya's never had any major injuries. As far as close fights, he's had a bunch of decisions. Let's go through those real quick. The first Vettori fight, it was a split, but if you go look at MMA decisions, that was back in April of 2018. 15 media members scored the fight for Izzy, 2 scoring it for Vettori, so I think most people felt like he won that. There was that really weird fight with Yoel Romero, where he won by decision. 12 scored it for Adesanya, 2 scored it a draw, and 7 scored it for Romero. There was the Blachowicz fight, which again I think most people felt like he lost, but still there were some people who did score it for Adesanya. There was 19 media members scoring the fight for Jan Blachowicz, 7 scoring it for Adesanya in that spot, which is kind of surprising. Let me double check that actually. I don't think that's right. Was there 7 people who thought that Adesanya won that fight? That seems kind of weird. Let me just go look here real quick, guys. Might have wrote that one down wrong in my notes. That's why it's good to double check these things. Yeah, 7 people scored it for Adesanya. This is crazy. Wow. I thought Jan clearly won that fight, but anyways, good thing I double checked that. And then there's obviously the Whittaker fight. We'll bring that one up here too. I can show you guys on the screen. So Adesanya defeats Whittaker. A lot of people felt like that was much closer. But actually there's even less people picking Whittaker here than people picked Adesanya over Jan, which is interesting. So again, if you look at that, 20 media members scored it for Adesanya, only 5 scoring it for Whittaker. I thought Adesanya won that fight. That was pretty decisive. Let's go take a look at the odds here. Oh, sorry. We're not going to take a look at the odds. We're going to look at his stats, of course. So Adesanya's stats, 3.93 significant strikes landed per minute, so that's less than Du Plessis. His striking accuracy is at 48%. His striking defense is at 56%. His takedown average is at 0.05, which is like nothing. His takedown accuracy is at 14%. His takedown defense is at 77%, although I don't know if we'll see any takedowns, but it'll be interesting. And as far as the odds go, right now, the odds makers having Adesanya about -140 around there on a couple books. Du Plessis, the underdog, a rare occurrence when the champion is the underdog. But if you look on Tapology, it's a different story. Let's go have a look there. It's much closer. If you look on Tapology, 51% going with Du Plessis, 49% going with Adesanya. Again, you don't have to pay any money or anything to put these picks in. Anyone can do these picks. So maybe that's a fan thing. There's some people who don't like Adesanya that are picking him. I don't know, but it's very interesting to see how they went with the picks. Okay, this is tough because I think there is a school of thought, that's out there about Adesanya having an off night against Strickland. I do think he did to a certain degree, but you also have to give Strickland credit for having the perfect game plan. Like I think Strickland had the perfect game plan, and I think Adesanya did have an off night. But even if Adesanya had an on night, I don't know if he beats Strickland because I think Strickland's style is just one that's very tough for Adesanya as well. When Strickland is coming forward and having, very good defense. I think people don't give Strickland enough credit for that. And remember, in that first round against Strickland, Adesanya actually got clipped in that first round. So we'll see if Du Plessis is able to duplicate that. But anyways, as far as the pick goes, I'm going to go with Dricus Du Plessis by decision. Now, I should mention Du Plessis, like I mentioned off the top, has only gone the distance, I think, twice in his entire career. Let me just double check that. Pretty sure it's twice. Yeah, he's only gone the distance twice. So probably not likely, as far as the data goes, but Adesanya is also really tough to finish. I mean, if you look at who he's been in there with, the only guy who's finished Adesanya in the UFC is Alex Pereira, and he did it in the 5th round, and it was a standing knockout. Pereira's got way more power than Du Plessis, so I don't think there's going to be a scenario where Du Plessis can knock out Adesanya. I don't think Du Plessis has the ground game to submit Adesanya. So that's why I think this fight will go the distance regardless. And I feel that way on the other side too. Like I think if Adesanya wins this, I don't think it'll be a finish or a knockout or anything like that. I think Du Plessis has shown his durability. It won't happen there. So a couple of reasons why I like Du Plessis. He's 5 years younger. He's been more active. Like I said, this is the longest layoff of Adesanya's career. Like there's so much pressure on Adesanya here. Like if he loses this, he's in a really bad spot, right? That'll be 2 losses in a row. He's already, I mean, technically if he loses this, it'll be what, 3 of his last 4 for a guy who's 35. That's not a good recipe. I mean, there's always the option of him moving up, I suppose, if he loses this, but again, there's so much pressure here. I think if Du Plessis loses this, he's young enough where he gets a couple wins, he's right back in the saddle, so to speak. They've also had some similar opponents, and I don't want to rely heavily on MMA math, but I do think it is worth mentioning that Du Plessis beat Sean Strickland. Again, close fight. Could like, I do understand people saying it could go the other way, but let's say it did go Strickland's way. If the fight did go to Strickland's side, the fact that Du Plessis made it that close, I mean, if you want to compare the 2 fights, Adesanya lost every single round against Sean Strickland. Du Plessis, had close rounds with Sean Strickland. So there's that. Now it could just be style make fights. How about Robert Whittaker? Now, they both fought Robert Whittaker in a rematch. Obviously, in the first fight with Whittaker and Adesanya finished him. But in their second fight, it was really close. And I talked about the scorecards there where people felt like Whittaker might have done enough to win that. Du Plessis actually finished Whittaker, and their fights were only about a year apart. So again, it's not like Adesanya fought a completely different Whittaker than who Du Plessis fought. It was just a year apart. I think there's something there where Du Plessis performed a lot better against Whittaker as opposed to Adesanya. So there's that too as well. The other thing we got to bring up too is while Adesanya and Du Plessis have similar records, I think there's just a few fights separating them. Adesanya has a whole career in kickboxing where he suffered knockouts and he's taken damage. And then if you look in his UFC career, like there's that fight with Kelvin Gastelum where he took a ton of damage as well. There's something to that. An older fighter who's taken more damage. Du Plessis, we haven't really seen him banged up too much. I know the Strickland fight, his face was pretty swelled after that one, but I think overall, if looking at this from a damage perspective, I think Du Plessis has taken less damage overall. One other thing that could be a factor in this fight too, like I mentioned, I do think it's going the distance. The judges could sway in Adesanya's favor because again, even though Adesanya's from New Zealand, you would think the fans are mainly going to be on his side here, being from New Zealand, as opposed to Du Plessis is from South Africa. So that's one thing to consider as well that could go to the Adesanya side. But I don't know. I just think like we have Du Plessis who it seems like he's getting better since that surgery. He's looked great, right? The nose surgery, he finishes Whittaker. He beats Sean Strickland. He's been more active. Again, like he has 2 really good wins over Strickland and Whittaker. And Adesanya, like, again, he's also performed very well at a high level, but he's also had, setbacks like the Jan Blachowicz fight and like the fight with Pereira as well. So we'll see. And even, the Pereira win that he got, that was a fight that almost went Pereira's way, right? You remember Pereira was teeing off on him too. So again, this is one of the toughest fights to pick. Like I definitely see people, and I understand why people are picking Adesanya here. And I also understand why he's the betting favorite because overall Adesanya has had a better track record in terms of overall opponents and all that stuff. But I also look at the fact that he's older and he's coming off a layoff. To me, those are things that favor Du Plessis. So again, my official pick will be Dricus Du Plessis by decision. But I think if Adesanya wins, it's going to go to the distance anyway. So if you're going to bet this, the over and the fight goes the distance, I don't think is a terrible play right now. But I do think Du Plessis will edge this one out. So I want to know what you guys think in the comment section below. Who are you picking? How do you think this one goes down? Let me know. I want to get your full prediction in this one and tell me how you think this one goes. Follow me on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, @Lynch on Sports. I do the show. I try and do the show every week if I can. But if there's any other upcoming notable fights you want me to preview, let me know. I love doing a deep dive into the stats and giving you my prediction. My name is James Lynch. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.